and I experienced quite a bit of bullying. He was a father figure to me in many respects, but he was a terrible bully to me and many other people off the air. He was a tremendous performer and a great bully character.
Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. Hey, welcome back to Coach Soul. I am so excited and thrilled to feel like I'm in Hollywood. I mean, Andy Regal is with us, and he's a veteran of TV production. And I don't know who's producing the show, Andy or me. I don't know.
I'll try not to give you direction, Steve. Yeah, try not to give you direction. Go right ahead.
So Andy's with us today, and Andy, we're talking about a very sensitive topic that oftentimes goes unnoticed. For me, growing up as a child, I described in my book, Piece by Piece, my blend experience with Mosaic Family, talking about ways that we grow and see our world through the ways we attach to it. And there was no attachment to my biological mother due to the fact that I had some disfiguration, medical issues, those type of things. And I felt like I had that rejection. Unfortunately, Andy, it was confirmed last year in October that my father had passed away, and I had to evoke a attorney to reach out to her. And it was revealed in January. My mother had disinherited to me that she had no legal obligation to refer to me that my father is dying. And to me, that's a form of bullying, in that aspect and how that came across. And, you think as a parent, oh my gosh, a parent, I have children and grandchildren. And oftentimes you think as a parent, you don't do that to your children with your biological parent. I'm curious. I shared a little bit about my past history. Were you, I know the topic is real good with you, Andy. Tell me, was there some stuff in your past that has alluded to this topic?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I'm so sorry you've gone through that, Steve. It's awful. And I think one of the primary ways in the workplace that people are bullied is also a lack of communication and being ostracized, being left out of the group. That is so hurtful and so traumatic at any age, especially if it happens with a close family member, someone who's supposed to be taking care of you, not turning their back on you. So I'm sorry for that. I will tell you that I came from the most functional family, a loving family. Hardly a harsh word was said. It was just a loving, wonderful family. I have two siblings, and similarly, my parents have passed. But the reason I mentioned that is because I came into the workplace thinking that and I was a very good son, by the way. I did everything by the book, got good grades, played sports, first trumpet, all these things. And I gave my parents no reason for concern, ever. And so I went into the workplace with, and this is going to sound like kind of self-blame, and I want to be very careful about that. But I did come into the workplace with this very naive notion that if I am a great worker, just like I was a great son, I'll get back, in a sense, the love that I got from my parents.
Right.
But that's not the workplace. That's really not the workplace. And so what you can have a dysfunctional upbringing and hope you find a functional family at work and be disappointed. In my case, I had a very functional family, loving family, and I didn't find that at work. And it was very shocking. It kind of blew up my core values. I thought I understood the world, and I really did not.
So, Andy, I hear this. I don't like the term normal. Everybody says we had a normal childhood. The only thing normal to me is a dryer setting that says normal. So we'll say that you had a good upbringing that didn't cause trauma that ever lasted into your situation. But I'm curious, here you are, you get into the workplace as a retired TV producer. Tell our audience a little bit about what got you started or interested in doing TV production.
Well, I think two things. One is I love to be in the center of things. So I like covering stories. I like to be in the middle of the newsroom. And I worked at MS Now as an executive producer. I worked at CNBC as an executive producer. I was global head of video at the Wall Street Journal, among other places. And I love that feeling. I also love the collaboration, even though oftentimes you're watching a newscast and all you see is the anchor. There's so many people behind the scenes who have worked tirelessly to get that broadcast together. And I loved the collaborative nature of putting a television show together. And then a little bit of ego involved, Steve, actually. I liked having a job where lots of people saw what I did. Some of them didn't like it, and I would hear about that. And I'm accustomed to getting feedback because what I have done during the course of my career has been very public in nature. And so I'm willing to take that, but I liked the feeling of doing something and having millions of people see it.
What are some TV shows or production that you have done that people may recognize that you did? So I'm going to stroke your ego a little bit here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm not even sure where to start, but I'll start way, way back. And this may not mean anything to you, but if you look it up on YouTube, in fact, it was funny. I just saw on ABC, they're running a documentary on ABC Network about when daytime talk shows ruled the world. And I helped create a show called the Morton Downey Jr. Show.
Oh, yes.
So you have to be of a certain age to remember that, but it was quite the phenomenon. And I think it's funny, actually, for the purposes of this conversation, because Morton Downey Jr. was, by definition, a horrible bully to his guests. That's the kind of show it was. It was a yelling and screaming show. It was really theater. But Morton had also a real temper off the air. And I experienced quite a bit of bullying. He was a father figure to me in many respects, but he was a terrible bully to me and many other people off the air. He was a tremendous performer and a great bully character on the air. So I experienced that, but we were on every magazine. It was a big phenomenon because Mort was the histrionics and the anger and the acrimony, but we covered very serious topics. So that was an experience. And then I helped start the cable network Court TV. I was one of the founding members of that operation. And I had the chance to cover some of the biggest trials of the last quarter century. I covered the O.J. Simpson trial. I covered William Kennedy Smith, which was a big deal then. He was a member of the Kennedy family that was accused of rape. He was acquitted. That case took place in Palm Beach. The Menendez brothers, who were accused of killing their parents, there were a lot of films done on that, documentaries, docudramas. I covered that case. I covered the Jeffrey Dahmer case, which many people remember. He was a serial killer in Milwaukee. And many, many others. So I had that opportunity. I was Johnny Cochran's executive producer. Johnny Cochran, of course, was O.J. Simpson's lawyer and a tremendous guy. And then I created all kinds of shows for CNBC and MS Now, talk shows primarily within their primetime programming. And so I've created networks, created shows. I created a show for NBC called Inside America's Courts, which aired on all the NBC stations. And that was kind of when they had all these judge shows coming on. We decided to do the real thing. So we had all these videos of real trials, and I created a show for NBC called Inside America's Courts, which was about all different kinds of trials going on in America. So it was a wonderful career in that respect, but the incivility and even degradation, Steve, that I experienced Harmed me in many ways. I had high anxiety, hypervigilance. I had trouble digesting. I had recurring nightmares of a bully boss, which I can tell you about. And I also had harmful thoughts because my self-esteem was so destroyed. And I'm a confident person. I was an executive producer, but I couldn't let my team see how much it was hurting me, that I wasn't being appreciated and treated well. In fact, in some cases, I felt I was being harmed. And I want to make the point again without making a speech, and we'll get into this in the conversation. I'm as hard a working employee as you'll ever have. I'm as devoted, as loyal. And I created shows that made millions of dollars. There was never got a bad review, but that's not what this issue is about. It's about really good employees, people that care. Those are the people who get bullied, not the apathetic people.
Well, one of the things I want to highlight here, you shared quite a bit, so I want to back up the train a little bit and kind of address some of these slowly. For my listeners in the audience of Coach So or anybody that's listening to this, I do want to say that there is no form of opinion or an agreement with Andy and his statement here with Coach So. We're just stating that these are some facts that Andy lived. We're not misaligning anyone. We're not accusing anyone of anyone. All we're trying to do is base in any situation, I like to have an overall picture, if you will. Oftentimes in a clinician's office, we sit down and we want to trace back, where did this all start? And this is what Andy's trying to do, is being able to work through that. And so I appreciate your honesty and candidness of, here's what I produced. When you think about TV production, that's what I wanted to start into, is journalism. So you can tell by my questions or things like that, I get into more of a journalistic, outside of the box thinking. And oftentimes there is pressure. I mean, I remember having a client who is a prominent journalist who had prominent exposure. I'm not at liberty to disclose, but there was high anxiety with this person because of the reporting standards, that when you have an owner that says, hey, we need you to dig up the dirt or twist the story to dirt, that's, to him, it was, to this person, it was for a bullying sense, because you're forced to report or you're going to lose your job. Is that the same case in your TV production?
Yeah, look, I got into this issue of workplace bullying. I didn't even realize I had been bullied, Steve. But I started thinking back on my career, writing a book, and I didn't even realize I had been bullied until I started doing a lot more research. So what I would say is, yes, of course, there's high pressure, high intensity in putting together a television production. But it's not limited to the media and entertainment worlds. There's pressure in everything. I don't care what you're doing. You have a boss, and you have to do a good job. If you don't, you're going to have the consequences. But even when you do a good job. So my point is, this is happening everywhere to everyone, in any industry, across the board. So I started, and I kind of made it specifically about television. Yes, there's yelling and screaming and all that kind of thing. My point is, and I told you about the definition about it has to be targeted and repeated and no benefit. If your boss is being a little tough with you, but you know that boss has your back, you know that boss cares about your future, I don't consider that bullying. Now, it'd be great if everyone was nice all the time, but I don't expect a boss to be that way. So in the heat of battle, when things are most tense, that's when tempers can flare. But then good managers apologize or repair the relationship. Those are not the bullies. Bullies don't apologize. I had a bully boss I worked for 8 years. And by the way, they're not always bullies. And sometimes the most charming people in the room, I call them brilliant jerks. They're brilliant, oftentimes bullies, but they harm the rest of the staff. So even with all the good they're doing. So yes, I experienced quite a bit in the control room. We used to call it the out of control room. But if it's in the realm of making the show better and there's a crisis and it needs to be resolved and there's some raised voices, that is not bullying, unless it's repeated and targeted and there's never an apology.
So let's do this for our audience, because we can use a term bullying or whatnot, and there's a variety of different I don't know, assumptions that can be made based upon our own experiences and things like this. Dealing with your experience and what you've dealt with, and now that you've written a book, and off mic we talked about another book that you're trying to write. What would you say? Yeah, bullying is not just in the workplace; it's everywhere. What would you classify bullying would be, so that our listeners have a better understanding of what we're engaging with, so everybody's on the same page?
Sure. And I want to be clear on this point. A lot of people ask me, well, is this about the current administration or is this about politics? It's not. If you want it to be, you can certainly talk about bullying and whether bullying is taking place in this country and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. A lot of people like a strong leader. Some people think Mr. Trump's a bully. I don't get into that, because Democrats and Republicans are bullies, and Democrats and Republicans are victims of bullying in the workplace. So my book is not political, it's apolitical. And so I would say, though, in the framework, but I do think it's part of our public discourse, this notion of how do we want to talk to one another. I'm interested in how we talk to one another and work with one another in the workplace. But this can also be, again, brought out into how we treat each other in our own homes, how we treat our neighbors, and of course, how our representatives speak to one another and speak to us and treat each other. So, having framed it that way, I'm interested in employees having the opportunity to do the best work they can and not to lose their psychological safety. That's the worst part of it, is when you don't feel safe in your own skin. That's how I determine also, not just by a strict definition, but by seeing how employees are reacting and how they feel when they come to work every day. I've coached people, Steve, and I'm sure you've talked to people in your own practice all the time, who cried on the way to work because the dread was just overwhelming about what they feared was going to happen. I've also counseled and coached people. And by the way, I also want to be clear, I'm not a licensed anything. I'm a lived experience bullying expert, but I am not trauma informed. I don't have a license to therapy or to counsel anybody. So I just want to be clear on that. That's your arena.
No, I appreciate that, Andy.
Yeah.
The thing, when you think about bullying, it's where someone tries to usurp their authority and control. I like the word control, the situation. Oftentimes when I talk to my clients, it's, well, I need to control my actions. Okay, is it really about control, which I feel is a knee-jerk reactionary motive, or are we managing? Even sharing those two words, you can feel your body become tense when you hear the word control versus manage, where it's a little bit more relaxed. And it just seems like in today's society, we get into a reactionary mode. And since you've done news and produced and things of this nature, I'm kind of curious, because when I think about what's happening in our recent light of 2026, has the media gone too far in bullying its listeners into a hidden agenda that they want to propaganda to focus on, rather than displaying the entire incidents? For example, not to get in politics, but oh my gosh, Mr. President wants to take over Greenland, and that's how the news spins it. And it's a type of form of propaganda bullying, in my opinion, because of the dynamics. He's trying to be assertive in protecting the United States by a certain gateway between Greenland and Europe. And so, again, not to get into the political piece, I'm investigative. I look at all aspects before weighing in on a conclusion. So does news have a type of way of kind of bullying the public opinion?
I wouldn't necessarily use the term bullying, although I see why you would ask the question that way. But I get this question a lot. Several things. Again, I was at the Wall Street Journal for a number of years, and I was in a couple of meetings with Mr. Murdoch, who owns the company. Uh, he never influenced one story that I ever did. I was and never heard of him influencing any story. Having said that, all the places I worked had one thing in common. They want to make money. They want to make money. So, in my experience, there's no hidden agenda. In fact, a lot of people think, and yes, of course, Fox News has a perspective, CNN has a perspective, MS Now has a perspective, and everything in between. They have a perspective, in my view, call it cynical as it may be, because the people at the very top, think that what they're doing, the way they're doing it, gives them the best chance to make money. That's it. That's it.
And I can solidify with that too, Andy. I had a client who is a prominent journalist. I'm not able to go into specifics, but this person was well known in the media context, and they were having anxiety, depression, just felt betrayal, those type of things, all because the boss came along and stated, we need this type of story. And it was going against his conscience on how to present that story. This is how I look at, okay, is that a form of bullying? So I appreciate you clarifying.
Yeah. And in all my years at the Wall Street Journal, especially, the only thing that mattered is we got the story right. And every day we came into work, me, my team, and everybody that I came in contact with in the newsroom at the Wall Street Journal, the most important thing was to get the story right. There was never any, hey, let's put this in there or let's not put it in there. I've never seen where somebody said, take that out because it makes our person look bad or whatever. So yes, mistakes are made, decisions are made, but they're made at the lower levels oftentimes, not at the highest levels, because the people at the highest levels have a lot to do. It's mostly the producers, associate producers, who are putting the packages together, putting the newer stories together. And I don't think that they usually, unless, again, if you're at Fox News, you're going to have a perspective. You're going to have a slant, if you will. There's nothing wrong with that. The audience wants that. The audience expects that. It's changed over the years, but that's the matter of they're trying to address the news in the way they feel their largest audience wants to hear it. Doesn't mean it's true or false. It just depends on your perspective about the truth of the matter or the falsity of it.
You know, it's fascinating when you get into production, because oftentimes with my little background of getting into journalism, radio broadcasting, those type of things, you got to do what the producer tells you to do. It's almost like you're a puppet on stage, so to speak. In the last 3 or 4 minutes that we have, Andy, what got you into, you said depression, things. We don't talk about those things. I mean, we see actors like, depressed states and things of that nature, some coming and reporting sexual harassment or those type of things. But as a TV producer, in what way would describe that as your feelings that you said earlier?
Yeah. And it happens because you care so much. Your identity is so wrapped up in the job, Steve. And, nobody really, if you think about it, who has more power and authority, and workplace bullying is a abuse of power. You kind of alluded to that just a few minutes ago. That's what it is. It's an abuse of power because it's very hierarchical at work. And who has more power over you in your life? First, your parents, right? But then as you become an adult, I would think a sheriff that runs a jail or a prison warden. Boy, oh boy, talk about the power over a person, or a judge in a courtroom. Complete autonomy. But there aren't that many places. But in work, everything depends on how the boss treats you, how you feel about how the boss is treating you, your self-esteem, your self-worth, your future, your popularity amongst your colleagues, your ability to pay your bills, to pay your mortgage. And so there's so much at stake, your ability to enjoy your home life, because, and I'll get into the problems that I had, it was all encompassing. So I brought the bully boss home with me, either in my head or on my shoulder, and I replayed all the interactions that I had whether it's threats of losing my job or firing me, or hating that script. That's the worst script I've ever seen. How could you possibly, and of course, if work was perfect, then we'd all get along fine. But there are things that happen in every job. And that's when a good leader has to come in. So because of the constant pressure and lack of appreciation, and constant micromanaging in some cases, mean-spirited nature of comments, things like that, and then the specter of it. It didn't happen every day, every hour, every minute, but just the specter of the next phone call, the next email, the next text, the next in-office meeting caused me to have all these psychological and physical problems. As I said earlier, couldn't digest food, couldn't enjoy my home life. I was not a good father or husband. I had babies when this first started. Couldn't enjoy my life, lost my self-esteem, and yet had to come into work every day and be a leader. And resilience is great until it's not.
We got 1 minute left, Andy.
Yeah.
When you recognize this, as men, we think oftentimes it's taboo to go and talk to someone about these situations, like myself, a licensed professional counselor. Did you have that finality or opportunity to say, hey, I want to work through this?
I so appreciate the question, and it's so spot on, Steve. You get it. There's so much shame involved with being bullied as an 8-year-old or a 28, 38, or 48-year-old. There's so much shame involved because there's so much at stake. You can't really confront the bully because you don't want to take a chance on the guy or the woman or whoever the boss is to firing you or making it worse. And so there's nobody that can help you. So one of my themes is to the bully victims that I'm speaking to right now, to I speak when I speak publicly, write about, you're not alone. I felt so alone. Bully victims, 100% of the time when they come to me, they say, I feel and felt so alone. And that's why we're having this dialogue and this conversation today, because as somebody who's experiencing this, you do not have to be alone.
No, that's so true. And it's often you see this in the news with adolescents that they were bullied, cyber bullied, or whatever. It's just horrific news when you hear a teen being bullied and they take their own life because they don't feel like they have somewhere to go. Andy, I really appreciate this opportunity. Guys, my listeners, I know I hate doing this to you guys and doing a cliffhanger, but we're going to come back around and Andy's going to explore a little bit more with me as far as what has taken place, what prompted him to leave TV production or just retire and get into the workplace bullying. So until next time, take care and God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.